Ryloth was the homeworld of one of the Star Wars galaxy's most prominent species, the Twi'leks, and at several points in the modern era of the galaxy, it found itself at the center of galactic geopolitics. During the Clone Wars in particular, Ryloth became one of the most important planets in the Outer Rim, playing host to one of the war's longest battles. But why was Ryloth, the tidally locked dust ball close to the edge of known space, so important? What was the full story behind the epic Battle of Ryloth? In this video, we'll be answering those questions.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Despite being the homeworld of one of the galaxy's most prolific species, Ryloth wouldn't have seemed all that important to casual observers. Most of the planet was uninhabitable due to tidal locking. Most of its communities were relatively low tech and poor, and the planet had few useful resources. During the Clone Wars, however, it was important for a few reasons. Firstly, Ryloth was located along the Corellian Run, albeit close to its end. Secondly, a long series of corrupt senators had granted the planet significant political power. And thirdly, Ryloth had one crucial resource that was always in high demand: real spice. Ryloth was a bastion of the spice trade, which meant that even though much of the planet was undeveloped and large swaths of its population lived in poverty, Ryloth's rulers were quite wealthy. On top of all this, at the start of the Clone Wars, Ryloth was made the headquarters of the Republic's 14th Sector Army, also known as Red Tail's Command. All of these factors meant that Ryloth, a loyalist world, was relatively high on the CIS's hit list from early on. At the start of the war, Count Dooku provided Karis Fen, a Twi'lek clan leader with separatist sympathies, with considerable amounts of funding in the hopes that he would be able to wrest political control of the planet from the Twi'lek loyalists. However, Fen ended up embezzling a lot of that money and using the rest to post bounties on Jedi, and this early separatist bid for control of Ryloth went nowhere. However, Fen's activities did allow members of the separatist leadership to make inroads on Ryloth, most notably Pasil Argente. Sometime in 22 BBY, Argente, the magistrate of the Corporate Alliance, began storing some of his personal wealth on Ryloth through corrupt brokers in Lesu. Among the goodies he stashed away on Ryloth were hordes of treasures stolen from worlds conquered by Corporate Alliance forces, many of which were extremely valuable. Unfortunately for Argente, however, Foreman Wat Tambor of the Techno Union discovered this secret stash of wealth. Tambor, who distrusted Argente and considered him a rival, coveted the magistrate's treasures and was not above abusing his power on the Separatist Council to steal them. Tambor mustered the Techno Union's armies and prepared to launch a full-scale assault on Ryloth, planning to use the invasion as cover while he looted the planet. The Techno Union's assault was swift and devastating. In orbit, a fleet of warships led by Nemoidian Captain Ma Tuk ripped apart Ryloth's defense fleet and killed its commanding officer, Admiral Dao, trapping Ryloth's defensive garrison on the planet's surface. Red Tail's command only had a small unit planetside led by Jedi Master Imagandi and Captain Keeley, and as the Confederacy began lending its own troops, they soon found themselves outnumbered. But D and his clones weren't alone. In these early stages of the battle, they received assistance from Chem Syndulla and an army of Twi'lek freedom fighters, who had assembled in response to the invasion. Even with support from the Twi'leks, however, Ryloth's Republic garrison was doomed. Master D and his men held out just long enough for Republic blockade runners to deliver crucial supplies to Syndulla and his men, following which the last of the clones were wiped out by the advancing battle droids. Syndulla and the Twi'leks resisted the separatist invaders bitterly, but in the end, they were forced to go into hiding, taking shelter in the countryside and beginning a campaign of guerrilla warfare against the CIS. Lesu, the capital, fell, and Tambor made the conquered city his fortress. As the droid army began occupying settlements all over Ryloth, Tambor ordered his troops to scour the planet for any valuables they could find, which he had shipped off-world to his personal vaults. Ryloth was under separatist occupation for several months, and in that time, Tambor and his subordinates fortified the planet against a potential Republic counterattack. In orbit, Captain Took established a blockade of Ryloth from his flagship, the Lucrehulk-class battleship Procurer, which was reinforced by at least 6 Munificent-class star frigates. Vulture droids and the Techno-Union's new Hyena bombers provided both air support for ground troops and fighter support for the blockade, while on the ground, Tambor mustered a huge droid army. Tambor's ground armies were mostly commanded by tactical droids, with Tambor's assistant, TA-175, assuming overall command from Lesu. South of the capital, in the village of Nabat, Tambor had TX-20 establish anti-air defenses in the form of powerful J-1 semi-autonomous proton cannons, which were protected by Twi'leks civilians employed as living shields. Of course, the occupation force also contained vast hordes of battle droids, reinforced by STAPs, AATs, and MTTs. Several months after Ryloth's capture, the Republic began a campaign to retake the planet. At that point in the war, Loyalist forces were stretched thin, and High Command was unsure of whether the Republic could even afford to commit to retaking the planet. But at the urging of several high-ranking Jedi generals, the operation got a green light. Overall, command of the Ryloth operation fell to Mace Windu, but the first stage of the counteroffensive was led instead by Anakin Skywalker. Skywalker, alongside his Padawan Ahsoka and Admiral Yularen, were put in charge of the naval stage of the Battle of Ryloth, tasked with breaking Mar Tuk's blockade. Skywalker initially attacked the blockade with 3 Venator-class Star Destroyers, the Resolute, Defender, and Redeemer. His plan was simple. The ships would drop out of orbit, launch fighters, and attack. Ahsoka Tano would lead the Republic's V-19 Torrent squadrons in a direct assault on the Separatist flagships, while the Star Destroyers would come in behind her. However, this plan went sideways when the Separatists called in additional cruisers to reinforce their blockade. In the chaos, the Republic lost the Redeemer and many of its fighters, the Defender was severely damaged, and Admiral Yularen was knocked unconscious. The Republic was forced to retreat. Things seemed grim for Ryloth, but fortunately for the Twi'leks, Skywalker and his Padawan were able to turn the battle around. Skywalker took sole command of the Defender and used it to ram the Procurer, destroying the blockade's flagship, while Tano led bomber squadrons in a rapid assault on the other Separatist cruisers. The blockade was broken, and Windu began the liberation of Ryloth in earnest. The ground assault on Ryloth was commanded in the north by Mace Windu and Commander Pons, and in the south by Obi-Wan Kenobi and Commander Cody. As the ground assault began, the Republic initially had trouble landing its assault ships due to the proton cannons at Nabat, forcing Windu to postpone the assault on Lesu while Kenobi led a small company of clones to take out the cannons. Kenobi, Cody, and Ghost Company successfully infiltrated Nabat and worked around the various defenses TX-20 had set up in the city, aided by a Twi'lek girl named Numa. Numa led Kenobi to the village center, where the cannons were, through the sewers, while Cody led a diversionary assault to draw the droids away from the cannons. While TX-20 and his droids were focused on Cody and Ghost Company, Kenobi successfully freed the Twi'lek hostages and destroyed the proton cannons. TX-20 was then ripped apart by the enraged people of Nabat, and Windu's assault ships were able to make groundfall just outside of the village. While Kenobi moved on to other occupied settlements in the southern hemisphere, Windu, Commander Pons, and the 91st Reconnaissance Corps began to push straight toward Lesu. Resistance was fierce, and the advance was slow, as Windu's ATTEs struggled to navigate Ryloth's treacherous mountain passes, where they were often exposed. Windu and the AT-RT riders of Lightning Squadron had more success than the larger walkers in clearing the road to Lesu, but by the time the capital was within sight, Windu no longer had the manpower to take it alone. For help, he sought out and allied with Charm Syndulla and the Twi'lek resistance. As Windu made inroads with the resistance, Wat Tambor began to realize that Ryloth was lost. As he and TA-175 made plans to evacuate, he ordered his troops to finish looting the towns around Lesu and then dispatched Hyena bombers to carpet bomb them, destroying whatever the droids couldn't steal. Tambor gathered all his loot in Lesu and began to ship it off-world, much to the ire of TA-175, who urged Tambor to prioritize personnel instead. Upon arriving at Lesu, Windu and Syndulla found themselves in a tricky tactical situation. Tambor had ordered the city's population to be forced into camps around the city walls, employing the same living shield tactics TX-20 had used at Nabat. Because of this, Windu was forced to completely rule out the use of artillery against the occupied capital. The only alternative, however, was to cross an energy bridge over a huge gorge that surrounded Lesu, a bridge that could be deactivated at will from the city. Charging over it would be suicidal. Ultimately, Windu overcame this dilemma through stealth tactics. He and 2 ARF troopers snuck across the bridge aboard an MTT and stormed the bridge control room, allowing Republic forces to swarm into Lesu. Meanwhile, Windu cut a swath through the city's defenders, making a beeline for the city's spaceport, where Tambor's evacuation shuttle waited. The shuttle ended up leaving without the Techno-Union foreman, however. TA-175 became tired of Tambor stalling and left without him, abandoning him in Lesu for Windu and Syndulla to capture. Upon realizing there was no escape, Tambor called in the Hyena bombers to destroy Lesu in a final act of spite, but the bombers were shot down before they could reach the capital. Tambor was taken into Republic custody and Lesu was liberated. Fighting on Ryloth continued for a few days after the fall of Lesu. Though most of the droid army left the system after TA-175 evacuated, a few holdouts remained, most notably in the city of Resden. Anakin Skywalker, Ahsoka Tano and the 501st Legion were sent out to mop up the stragglers while the rightful Twi'lek government was reinstated in Lesu. For long, Ryloth was completely free of battle droids and its Republic garrison returned, now stronger, warier, and more closely coordinated with Cham Syndulla and his fighters. Ryloth would not fall so easily in the future. Ryloth was actually the site of a second battle during the Outer Rim sieges, much later in the war, but the planet was never again occupied by the CIS and remained free for the duration of the Clone Wars. But what do you think? Are there other battles you'd like us to take a look at? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, and as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.